Well, the Journal de Montréal is reporting this morning that there are half as many ambulances available in Montreal and Laval in 2023 than there were back in 2020. So to explain what the situation is and what are the causes, and more importantly, what are the solutions, happy to be joined by Hal Newman, journalist at The Last Ambulance Project. He's a former paramedic. Hal, welcome back to the program.
Hey, David.
So, what's the situation? Why are we saying we don't have enough ambulances in Montreal and Laval compared to, say, 3-4 years ago?
What do you need to staff an ambulance? You need 2 paramedics. And there's also has had a retention problem with paramedics that dates back several years, probably a decade or so. The working conditions are miserable. And Urgence Santé has just never conquered the ability to retain paramedics for more than 5 years at a stretch. So, 50% of the paramedics who left last year had less than a year experience. So if we're unable to retain paramedics, we are definitely going to have a problem with putting ambulances on the street.
So this is not something that has to do with the actual vehicles. We have enough ambulances. We just don't have the people to staff them.
Yeah, look, we have a profession that still isn't recognized as a profession, and I've been doing this a long time. Mm-hmm. 40 years of waiting to be recognized as a healthcare profession.
So paramedics are not recognized as healthcare professionals.
Right.
Wow.
And they're also, while tentatively or supposedly part of the healthcare system, mm-hmm. Last week was National Paramedics Week right across Canada. And for reasons best known to Minister Dubé, he couldn't bring himself to wish paramedics a good week. So sometimes you kind of wonder if really the ambulance service is part of the healthcare system. It's interesting, though, that if you look at police academies, there's a queue, there's a waiting mm-hmm. list to get into police academies. Mm-hmm. If you ask the Montreal Fire Department if they're stretched for personnel, hell, there's a waiting list just to take the exam to become a firefighter. Paramedics, the problem is we've never recognized paramedics as healthcare professionals. We have some of the most highly trained paramedics in Canada who are limited in their scope of practice. The wages are middle of the road at best. The pay scale is awful. You have to work 12 years to reach the top of the pay scale. Compare that to 5 years for a cop or a firefighter. And then the other big issue is retirement. Paramedics have to work until their bodies break down. Whereas if you're a firefighter, you put in 25 years service and then you get to retire and you have a pension. So yeah, it's a question of working conditions and retention. And so we're playing catch up, and we're going to continue playing catch up until we resolve the working conditions.
So is it a question of money? We're seeing the numbers. It's dismal. Santé Québec, the new agency, is going to be in charge of this. Minister Dubé called for an independent auditor to look how Urgence Santé is managing the issue. Why is this such a mess? Why aren't we taking care of this? Because you seem to say, okay, it's just a question ultimately of recruiting, money, working conditions. We're doing it elsewhere, as you mentioned. Why not here? Where's the issue or the thing that's blocking this?
Leadership. I actually met with and asked questions of the director of. So we have a provincial director of emergency pre-hospital care, a gentleman by the name of Paul Levesque, and I actually asked him, what's your vision? What's your vision statement mm-hmm. for EMS, emergency medical services in the province of Quebec? And he couldn't tell me, and that's our problem. So we have a profession that's waiting to be recognized, and it's being led and managed by people who, sorry for sounding impolite, but they couldn't find their way out of the back of an ambulance if the lights were on and the doors were open because they aren't paramedics. And they've never spent any quality time working as paramedics. And that's who's running our system.
Are you talking about Urgence Santé Management or at the ministry?
I'm talking right across the province. But sure, if you're talking about Urgence Santé, the guy who's running Urgence Santé is an ex-cop, which is, if you want some good irony, so Rick Liebman, who's running the Montreal Fire Department, is a former paramedic and firefighter.
Right.
So if you want to have some street credibility and some real leadership, then you need to spend some time in the trenches, so to speak. The people running our EMS system in Quebec, they haven't spent a whole lot of time actually working in what we call the yellow box in the ambulances themselves. Mm-hmm. And until such time as we actually have some visionary leadership, people who can connect with the people on the front lines, we're just going to go through. This cycle is going to continue and continue and continue.
But then, isn't there a real risk for the population? I mean, if we don't have enough paramedics out there in the ambulances, we've seen already these stories of wait times putting people's lives in danger. I mean, isn't there a serious consequence? This is beyond just administrative back and forth here, or people being territorial or politics. There are lives in play. Am I wrong here? Am I exaggerating?
No, you're not exaggerating at all. We've moved well past hyperbole. We're really into life and death here. Urgence Santé has an internal emergency measures plan that it puts in place when it has emergency calls on hold in a queue, if you will. Mm-hmm. There are days when there are 30 calls holding. Those are 30 calls. People who called 911, and those calls are holding for an available paramedic, an available ambulance. We talk in terms of tipping points. We're well past tipping point. And the reality is none of us would put up with this if it was our fire service. Mm-hmm. If the fire service had put out an announcement and said, yeah, listen, sorry, we don't have enough staff. 50% of our stations will be closed. And we might get there in time to save the living room. Maybe. Or if the cops, if the police services said, sorry, 40% of our effective of our police officers aren't going to be in this weekend. And we're going to use private placement agencies to bring in police officers from elsewhere in the province to staff Montreal. Hey, they don't know the streets. They have no familiarity with the communities, but that's where we're at. We would never put up with that. But that's what we do with Urgence Santé on a daily basis.
Well, this is troubling. We've spoken a few months ago, and I remember the situation seemed dire, and yet still no movement from the authorities on this. Hal, I'm baffled here. Thank you for coming on and shedding some light on this situation. Here's hoping it'll get better soon.
Yeah, David, honestly, you can exhale now. It's going to. If you're holding your breath in hope, don't. It's going to take action. People are going to have to get upset. They're going to have to get pissed off enough to engage with their local political representatives to get them engaged.
Unfortunately, I'm afraid that something terrible is going to have to happen before there's a real reaction. Hal, I got to go. Thank you so much for your time.
Take care, David.
Take care, Hal.